the urinary system. So we start out with the kidney, supplied by the renal arteries, and in front of them drained by the renal veins. And so out here you can see the cortex, and each of these structures here would be a renal or medullary pyramid. Okay. Now if we look at a larger kidney, we can see those components a little bit better. We have individual kidneys that are upright on stands. This just happens to have all the same structures together. So again, we would have the cortex and the medullary or renal pyramids. Notice how those are striped looking? That's because just about everything they contain is parallel, giving a striated appearance. All right? So we talked about how the blood was filtered and modified and concentrated. So the tip of each of these pyramids is known as the papilla. Here is one pyramid. So this would be its papilla. Hence we call the ducts right at that point the papillary ducts. And those drain into the calyces. So right here you can see a little hole, and that's representing the openings of the papillary ducts into a calyx. So a single calyx with one pyramid is known as a minor calyx, and that's the first time we can call that fluid content urine. So in the lecture quiz question, I said, what's the content of the papillary collecting ducts? Starting with the capsule all the way through the nephron to the capillary ducts, it's going to be filtered. As soon as it drips into the minor calyx, it's known as urine. We're no longer modifying and taking out amino acids or concentrating. And the minor calyx is the beginning of where we find transitional epithelium. So two or more minor calyces, there's three, come together to form a major calyx. And then the minor and major calyces form the pelvis. And then the pelvis narrows to form the ureter. Okay? So we'll come back to that when we follow it through with the bladder. All right, so here is a pyramid with its associated cortex. And we have the blood supply in that area. So between the pyramids, we would have the interlobar branches of the renal artery. There's an interlobar, interlobar, interlobar. And those are connected by the arcuate arteries, forming an arch. And then extending straight out, perpendicular, into the cortex, we have interlobular, or if you prefer, the cortical radiate. They radiate out into the cortex. So now when we look at this vessel, here would be right along the side here would be an interlobar and the arcuate artery. Okay. Above that would be the cortex, below that would be the medulla. So then up in the cortex we have the interlobular artery again. And so here we would have an interlobular artery. Coming off of that, we would have afferent arterioles. They would go into the capsule, part of the nephron, to form the glomerular capillaries, or just glomerulus. And then leaving that would be the efferent arteriole. Okay? And the efferent arteriole can do one of two things. It will form the peritubular capillaries, which then go into the interlobular veins. Or if it's down near the arcuate artery, it will form the vasa recta down in the papilla, or the papillary, the renal pyramid. So peritubular capillaries are in the cortex, vasa recta are in the medulla. Okay? Now the white structure here is the nephron. So we have the Bowman's capsule, or glomerular capsule. The filtrate leaves that in the proximal convoluted tubule. And then we have the descending limb of the nephron loop, or the loop of Henle, and the ascending limb, which then becomes the distal convoluted tubule. And that's the end of the nephron. Right? The collecting ducts will attach to several distal convoluted tubules, starting in the cortex, and then moving into the medulla, and then finally near the tip of the pyramids, the larger, we call them papillary ducts. Okay, down in this region. Now, if we look at this model over here, it's a little, I guess I would say, intimidating, just because it's so many colors. just followed it, you can figure it out. So I would suggest that you not try to memorize it by color, but in the sequential structure that I just talked about, right? So again, here's the arcuate artery. So above here is cortex, which you can tell, we have the capsules and the convoluted tubules. Down here would be the pyramid, the medulla, okay? So arcuate artery, so this vessel extending up into the cortex is the interlobular artery, again, by position. Branching off of it, we would have the afferent arteriole. And leaving the smaller diameter afferent arteriole. Okay? Now there you can tell the afferent arteriole just because it's carrying blood away from the interlobular artery. If you can't see that, and all you can see is this view, you can still tell that this is afferent arteriole because it's wider in diameter than this one. Okay? Although you can't see it leaving the interlobular artery, this is going to be the afferent, larger diameter, efferent, smaller diameter. But if you can see its attachment to the interlobular artery, that makes it a little bit easier. Now, efferent arterioles up in the cortex will form the peritubular capillaries when they lose their smooth vessel. Down here, we have an efferent arteriole close to the arcuate artery, and instead of forming peritubular capillary, it's going to form the vasorecta. Okay? Which means straight vessel. So you don't have to worry about these capillaries here. I'm not going to ask you those. These loops, red or blue, are going to be the vasorecta, and they're found only in the medulla, okay, only in the medullary periods. So those are the blood vessels. Again, arcuate artery, interlobular, afferent, efferent, peritubular capillaries, and vasorecta. Okay. All right, now for the capsule. The nephrons are multicolored segments here. Rather than all white, you can still identify them sequentially. So we have the capsule, Bowman's capsule or glomerular capsule, all right? Attached to it is the proximal convoluted tubule. Remember, proximal means closest to point of origin, all right? So this yellow brown layer is the proximal convoluted tubule. And then it's going to descend, forming the descending limb of the nephron loop. And then it curves, it comes back up as the ascending limb. Now if you're not sure, what's the next structure of the ascending limb? We finished the nephron by forming the distal convoluted tubule. So we follow this up. Here it's convoluted, and here it's attaching to the collecting duct. So that's going to be distal, not proximal. Okay? So proximal convoluted tubules attached to the glomerular capsule. Distal convoluted tubules attached to the collecting duct. And then from that you can figure out whether it's going to be the descending or the ascending limb. If it's coming from proximal, it's descending. If it's going up to distal, it's ascending. Okay, so rather than memorizing the colors, just associate it with whether it's coming immediately from the capsule or going into the collecting duct. All right? Okay, so notice how this nephron right here comes down and loops while it's still in the cortex. So that's a short nephron completely within or mostly within the cortex. So it's called a cortical nephron. Its nephron loop has nothing to do with concentrating the filtrate. It doesn't go into the medulla. It's not going to do any concentration of salt. The juxtamedullary nephron sends its loop all the way down deep into the medulla. So it's going to create that osmotic gradient, where there's a higher and higher and higher sodium concentration the closer we get to the medullary, the pyramid, the patella of the pyramid. So remember, the nephron loop does not concentrate the filtrate. That actual portion of concentration occurs in the collecting duct as it passes through the medulla. The purpose of the nephron loop is to create the gradient, which is then used in the collecting duct by opening out of your, removing those water channels. The reason you know is, remember I wrote the numbers 300 and 100? So when the filtrate comes into the Nephron loop, it's 300 milliosmoles, particles per milliliter. When it leaves, it's only 100. So it's obviously gotten more dilute, okay? So it's going to stay dilute when it passes through the collecting duct, unless you really, really need to reabsorb water, and then it will become concentrated as water is removed by the increasing salt gradient. So the next model, let's do the last one here, is based on the color pattern and what we see in this bigger one. But you don't have to know those colors to figure this one out, okay? So just by looking at this model alone, you can kind of figure out what you're looking at by those relationships. So here's the capsule. Here is the glomerulus, all right? Here are the podocytes that cover the capillaries. So you can see that here as well. So here's the parietal layer. Here's the visceral layer, which we call the podocytes. Remember I said I would ask you to identify these cells, and there's 3 different cells. So if I say name these cells covering the capillaries, those are podocytes. They create the filtration membrane, part of it. Here is the smooth muscle cells of the afferent arteriole. So these can be called granular or juxtaglomerular. Granular because you can actually see granules of the renin in there that affects blood pressure. And then here, this is the distal tubule. The nuclei of these cells are very close together. So a dense spot, and that's what it is. You can actually see that a little bit better on this model. So here's the macula densa of the distal tubule. Here's the afferent arteriole and efferent arteriole. So filtrate is in this space here. So what do we call that part of the nephron that's immediately attached to the capsule? Proximal or distal? Proximal. So here's our proximal convoluted tubule. The filtrate is going to leave the capsular space and go into the proximal convoluted tubule. So notice this color. The blue is the really tall microvilli. So here's it's very highly convoluted. So just one cut, we're going to cut it multiple times because it keeps turning back and forth on itself. So this is also proximal convoluted tubule, and this is also proximal convoluted tubule. They're the same structure, all right? Now this one is the distal tubule coming up between afferent and efferent. So it's kind of purple, so that makes this one distal convoluted tubule as well. All right, so that's what I mean by knowing what you're looking at and just matching it up without memorizing the colors. This happens to be the ascending limb, because it's thin, but I'm not going to tag that one. I would just tag ascending on where you can see the whole thing. All right? And then the larger structure here is the collecting duct. Okay? It's not a papillary duct because we're in the cortex. You know you're in the cortex when you can see the capsule. Because the capsule is only in the cortex. It's never in the medulla. Okay? All right, last structure then, coming back to the flow of the urine. Again, we have the 2 ureters. Back in focus. And they come down to the bladder. And they pass in at an angle. So we see the 2 openings for each ureter, one for each ureter, and the opening for the single urethra. All right? So the 2 ureters and the urethra. And there's a smooth triangular space without mucosa, holes or rugae, known as the trigone. Remember we call the longitudinal folds of mucosa in the stomach the rugae? We call these folds the rugae as well. Remember the name of the smooth muscle of the bladder? We give it a name. Detrusor. The lining is transitional, but we did. But the smooth muscle is called the detrusor. We have another smooth muscle, a thickening of the detrusor muscle here, known as the internal urethral sphincter. This happens to be male.